The 1970s were supposed to kill the muscle car. Emissions regulations, insurance premiums, and the oil crisis tried their best. But before the party ended, Detroit built some of the fastest quarter-mile monsters the world had ever seen. Today, we're counting down the 12 fastest 1970s muscle cars over the quarter mile. The survivors, the rebels, and the last warriors from an era that refused to die quietly. These are the cars that proved horsepower wasn't dead. It was just getting one last hurrah. Number 12, 1970 Plymouth Duster 340. The 70s opened with Plymouth proving that muscle car performance didn't require a big price tag. The 1970 Duster 340 packed Chrysler's legendary small block into a lightweight package that could embarrass cars costing twice as much. This was blue-collar speed at its finest. Under the hood sat a 340 cubic inch V8 rated at 275 horsepower. Properly equipped Duster 340s ran consistent 14.6 to 14.8 second quarter miles with trap speeds around 94 miles per hour. The magic was in the package. Plymouth kept the weight down to 3,200 pounds, tuned the suspension for straight-line acceleration, and offered aggressive 3.55 rear gears. The styling was pure early 70s aggression. The semi-fastback roofline gave it a sleek profile, while dual hood scoops hinted at the performance underneath inside. The interior was basic but functional. This wasn't a luxury car pretending to be fast. It was a purpose-built performance machine that cost less than $3,000. The 340 small block was a torque monster, delivering strong, low-end grunt from just 3,200 RPM. At drag strips across America, Dusters became giant killers, embarrassing Corvettes and Camaros driven by people who'd spent thousands more today. The Duster 340 is remembered as one of the best performance bargains of the muscle car era. Number 11, 1970 Oldsmobile Cutlass 442 W30. Oldsmobile's 442 had earned its reputation throughout the 60s, and the 1970 W30 package brought it to peak form. This wasn't just a muscle car with a big engine. It was a carefully engineered performance machine, delivering 14.3 to 14.5 second quarter miles, with trap speeds approaching 98 miles per hour. The W30 option transformed the standard 442 with a 455 cubic inch V8 officially rated at 370 horsepower. Though dyno testing suggested closer to 420, the package added forced air induction through functional hood scoops, hotter camshaft timing, and an aluminum intake manifold. The result was a torque monster producing over 500 pound-feet at just 3,200 RPM. What separated the W30 from ordinary muscle cars was attention to detail. The suspension featured heavy-duty components throughout, the brakes were upgraded with front discs, and the steering was quick and responsive. Oldsmobile had built a muscle car that could turn and stop, not just go fast in a straight line. The forced air induction was particularly clever. As speed increased, ram air pressure forced additional air and fuel into the engine, effectively adding 15 to 20 horsepower at 60 miles per hour. This wasn't just a cosmetic hood scoop. It was functional engineering that made the car faster where it mattered most. The 1970 W3442 represented Oldsmobile at its performance peak, proving that sophisticated engineering and brute force weren't mutually exclusive. Number 10, 1970 Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 429. Mercury's Cyclone spoiler looked like it had driven straight off the NASCAR superspeedway. With its massive rear wing and aerodynamic nose, the 1970 model was the final evolution of Mercury's racing program made street legal, equipped with the 429 cubic inch Cobra jet engine. It delivered 14.2 second quarter miles that humiliated nearly everything else on the street. The 429 Cobra jet was descended from Ford's legendary FE series big blocks. Officially rated at 370 horsepower, real output was closer to 450. The engine featured ram air induction, high-flow heads, and a radical camshaft. Trap speeds in the 98 to 100 mile per hour range meant this Mercury could hang with the fastest Mopars and GM products. The aerodynamic bodywork wasn't just for show. The massive rear wing provided downforce at high speeds, while the nose piece reduced frontal area and improved airflow. The styling promised performance that the drivetrain could actually deliver. Wild graphics, huge wing, and aggressive stance backed by legitimate speed. The interior was surprisingly well appointed for such an aggressive machine. Mercury's upscale positioning meant comfortable bucket seats, full instrumentation, and decent sound insulation. The suspension balanced drag strip performance with street usability, featuring staggered shocks to control axle hop during hard launches. The 1970 Cyclone Spoiler 429 represented Mercury's final serious attempt at muscle car dominance, combining NASCAR-inspired styling with legitimate straight-line performance. Number 9, 1970 Ford Torino Cobra 429 Super Cobra Jet. Ford's Torino Cobra was their blue-collar muscle car answer to the Plymouth Roadrunner. The 1970 model with the 429 cubic inch Super Cobra jet engine delivered consistent 14.1 to 14.3 second quarter miles, making it one of the fastest Fords you could buy in the early 70s. The Super Cobra jet option took the already potent 429 and added drag racing components. Forged steel crankshaft, upgraded connecting rods, baffled oil pan, and aggressive camshafts. Official horsepower remained at 370. But that rating was fiction designed to keep insurance rates manageable. The drag pack option was essential for those low 14-second times. It included a Detroit locker differential, ensuring both rear tires received equal power, and rear axle gearing in either 3.91 or 4.30 ratios that maximized acceleration. The shaker hood scoop protruded through the hood and fed cold air directly into the carburetor, functional and intimidating. Weight was the Torino's challenge at 3,800 pounds, but Ford compensated with more power and better gearing. The 429's legendary reliability under abuse made the Cobra a favorite among drag racers who needed cars that could handle repeated launches without grenading. The 1970 Torino Cobra Super Cobra Jet was a purpose-built drag racer with license plates. Loud, rough, and brutally fast. Number 8, 1970 Dodge Challenger Petit 440 Magnum. Dodge arrived late to the pony car party in 1970, but made up for lost time with the Challenger. The RT model with the 440 cubic inch Magnum V8 delivered quarter-mile times in the 14 flat range, making it one of the quickest first-year models in automotive history. The 440 Magnum was Dodge's mid-range big block, slotted between the standard 383 and the legendary Hemi. Rated at 375 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque, it offered nearly Hemi performance at a fraction of the cost with better street manners. The engine featured a single 4-barrel carburetor and hydraulic camshaft that made it relatively easy to tune and maintain. The Challenger's E-body platform was larger than Chrysler's compact A-body cars, providing better weight distribution and stability at high speeds. The 110-inch wheelbase gave the car a planted feel. What made the 440 Challenger special was its versatility. With the optional shaker hood scoop and proper gearing, it could run mid-13s while remaining civilized enough for daily driving. The styling was pure early 70s Dodge. Long hood, short deck, aggressive stance. Colors like Plum Crazy, Go Mango, and Top Banana ensured your Challenger would never blend into traffic. The 440's torque curve peaked at 3,400 RPM, providing strong acceleration from any speed across a broad power band. The Challenger RT440 represented Dodge's ability to enter an established market and immediately compete at the highest level. Number 7, 1970 Pontiac GTO 455. The GTO created the muscle car segment in '64, and by 1970, it had evolved into a refined but potent performer. The 455 cubic inch V8 delivered quarter-mile times in the high 13-second range with trap speeds around 100 miles per hour. This was the final year the GTO could be ordered with such massive displacement, making it a historic milestone. The 455 LS5 was rated at 360 horsepower, though real-world dyno testing suggested closer to 400. Peak torque of 500 pound-feet arrived at just 3,200 RPM, giving the GTO freight train pulling power from low revs. The long-stroke architecture generated tremendous leverage on the crankshaft, translating into massive low-end grunt that made the car virtually impossible to bog down. What distinguished the GTO from cruder muscle cars was Pontiac's attention to chassis dynamics. The suspension provided good body control without beating occupants to death, the steering offered decent feedback, and the brakes with front discs matched the acceleration capability. The GTO wasn't just fast in a straight line, it was a balanced performance car. The 1970 GTO 455 represented the end of an era. It was the last year Pontiac could offer such massive displacement before emissions regulations forced downsizing, delivering legitimate 13-second capability with enough refinement to serve as daily transportation. Number 6. 1971 Plymouth Cuda 440 plus 6. By 1971, muscle car performance was in steep decline as emissions regulations began strangling engines and insurance companies punished performance car buyers with sky-high premiums. But Plymouth built one final monster before the curtain fell. The 1971 Cuda, with the 440 cubic inch 6-barrel engine, could still run mid-13-second quarter miles, making it one of the last legitimate muscle cars before the dark ages of the late 70s arrived. The 446-barrel, and also called the 440 plus 6, featured 3 2-barrel carburetors mounted on an aluminum intake manifold. The center carburetor handled normal driving, while the outboard carbs opened under heavy throttle to flood the engine with fuel. And air official horsepower was 385, down from the 1970 rating due to new SAE net measurement standards. But the engine still produced enough power to embarrass nearly everything on the street. What made the 71 Cuda special was that it represented the last gasp of unrestricted performance. Starting in 1972, engines would be further detuned to meet emission standards, compression ratios would drop, and performance would crater. The 71 models were the final year before the dam broke. Buyers who understood what was coming snapped up 446-barrel Cudas, recognizing them as the last of a dying breed. The Cuda's aggressive styling made it instantly recognizable. The shark nose front end, the dramatic fender bulges, and the available shaker hood scoop created a visual package that screamed performance. Plymouth offered outrageous colors like violet, sassy grass green, and lemon twist that ensured your Cuda would never blend into the background. The interior featured high-back bucket seats and full instrumentation, though comfort and refinement took a backseat to performance. The 6-barrel induction system was both the car's greatest strength and its biggest weakness. When working properly, it delivered seamless power from idle to redline, but the 3 carburetors required careful synchronization and frequent adjustment to maintain proper operation. Many owners eventually converted their 6-barrel setups to single 4-barrel configurations just to reduce maintenance headaches. Those who kept the original setup running correctly were rewarded with one of the most distinctive power plants of the muscle car era. The Cuda's E-body platform provided better handling than most muscle cars of the era. The torsion bar front suspension and leaf spring rear offered good control over body motions, and the wide stance gave the car planted feel through corners. The brakes with front discs standard provided stopping power that was adequate for the car's performance envelope. This wasn't just a drag strip special, it was a car that could handle winding roads with reasonable competence. Weight distribution wasn't ideal with the heavy big block engine mounted far forward, but Mopar's engineers compensated with spring rates and shock valving that minimized understeer. The steering was reasonably quick and offered decent feedback, allowing drivers to place the car accurately even when pushing hard. The overall dynamic package was better than the Cuda's raw appearance suggested. The 1971 Cuda 446-barrel represented the end of Chrysler's muscle car dominance. After 71, the Hemi was gone, the 6-barrel was discontinued, and compression ratios dropped across the board. The cars that followed were shadows of their predecessors. The 71 6-barrel Cuda stood as the final example of what Chrysler could build when engineers were allowed to prioritize performance over emissions compliance today. These cars are among the most collectible muscle cars ever built, not just for their performance, but for what they represented, the last roar before the silence. Number 5. 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1. Buick wasn't supposed to build muscle cars. They were the sophisticated division, catering to doctors and lawyers who wanted comfort and prestige. But the 1970 GSX Stage 1 proved that sophistication and speed weren't mutually exclusive. With its 455 cubic inch Stage 1 engine, the GSX could run quarter miles in the high 13s with trap speeds around 100 miles per hour, making it one of the fastest cars Buick ever built and one of the most underrated muscle cars of the 70s. The Stage 1 package transformed Buick's standard 455 into a genuine performance engine. Modifications included a hotter camshaft, higher compression ratio, improved cylinder heads, and a performance-oriented carburetor. Official horsepower remained at 360, but that rating was fiction. Multiple magazine tests suggested real output closer to 425 horsepower. The torque figure of 510 pound-feet at 2,800 RPM was particularly impressive, among the highest in the industry. What made the GSX special was that it delivered muscle car performance with luxury car refinement. The interior featured comfortable bucket seats, full instrumentation, and sound insulation that made highway cruising pleasant. The ride quality was better than competitors like the Roadrunner or Cobra, and the fit and finish was notably superior. You could drive the GSX to a business meeting without feeling like you'd arrived in a street racer. The styling was distinctive Buick, aggressive but not garish, muscular but not crude. The GSX appearance package included bold stripes, a rear spoiler, and hood-mounted tachometer. The most famous GSX color schemes were Apollo white with black stripes and Saturn yellow with black stripes, both of which ensured the car attracted attention wherever it went. But the GSX could also be ordered in subtle colors for buyers who preferred a sleeper appearance. The Stage 1 engine's torque curve was ideal for street performance. Peak torque at 2,800 RPM meant the GSX pulled like a freight train from any speed. Passing maneuvers on the highway required just a flex of the throttle pedal, and the engine would surge forward with authority. On the drag strip, that low RPM torque translated into brutal off-the-line acceleration that could catch competitors sleeping. The transmission was Buick's version of GM's Turbo Hydra-Matic 400, one of the strongest automatics ever built. Shifts were quick and firm, and the transmission could handle the Stage 1's torque without complaint. Most GSX buyers chose the automatic, though a 4-speed manual was available for purists. The automatic actually delivered better quarter-mile times due to its consistent shift points and lack of opportunity for driver error. The chassis was tuned for a balance between performance and comfort. The suspension featured heavy-duty components throughout, but the spring rates weren't so stiff that the car beat you up on rough roads. The steering was reasonably quick for a car of its size, and the front disc brakes provided good stopping power. The GSX handled better than its luxury car image suggested, capable of respectable performance on winding roads. The 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1 proved that muscle cars didn't have to be crude or uncomfortable to be fast. It delivered legitimate 13-second quarter-mile capability while maintaining enough refinement for daily driving. The car represented Buick's brief foray into serious performance, a moment when the conservative division threw caution to the wind and built something truly special. Today, the GSX is among the most collectible Buicks ever made, valued for its rarity, performance, and unique position in muscle car history. Number 4. 1970 Chevrolet Chevelle SS 454 LH 6. The 1970 Chevelle SS with the Elias 6454 cubic inch engine is considered by many enthusiasts to be the greatest muscle car ever built. With quarter-mile times consistently in the 13.2 to 13.5 second range and trap speeds around 105 miles per hour, it was one of the fastest production cars you could buy in 1970. The LS6 represented Chevrolet's ultimate expression of big block performance before emissions regulations forced the company to abandon such extreme specifications. The LS6 454 was rated at 450 horsepower and 500 pound-feet of torque, making it the highest factory-rated engine of the muscle car era. These numbers were conservative. Dyno testing revealed output closer to 500 horsepower at the flywheel. The engine features solid lifters, rectangular port cylinder heads that flowed massive amounts of air, an aggressive camshaft, and an aluminum intake manifold. Every component was chosen to maximize power with little regard for emissions or fuel economy. The LS6's performance was devastating. 0 to 60 miles per hour took under 6 seconds. 60 to 100 miles per hour required less than 8 seconds. Top speed approached 130 miles per hour. These were supercar numbers achieved through displacement and engineering, rather than exotic materials or complex technology. The LS6 was American performance philosophy distilled to its purest form. There's no replacement for displacement. What made the LS6 Chevelle particularly formidable was its accessible power delivery. Unlike temperamental race engines that required high RPM to make power, the 454 pulled strongly from 2,000 RPM all the way to its 6,000 RPM redline. The broad power band made the car easy to drive fast, allowing even inexperienced drivers to achieve impressive quarter-mile times. There was no need to slip the clutch at 5 grand or time shifts perfectly. Just stomp the gas and hold on. The Chevelle's A-body platform provided an excellent foundation for the LS6's power. The wheelbase was long enough to provide stability, but the overall weight was kept reasonable at around 3,700 pounds. The suspension featured coil springs at all 4 corners, providing better wheel control than leaf spring designs. With the optional F41 sport suspension, the Chevelle handled surprisingly well for a car of its era, capable of respectable lap times on road courses. The styling was restrained compared to some muscle car competitors. Chevrolet didn't rely on giant wings or wild graphics to sell the LS6. Instead, they let the performance speak for itself. The Chevelle SS featured subtle badging, a cowl induction hood, and classic proportions that have aged better than more flamboyant designs. The interior was functional but not luxurious, with bucket seats, full instrumentation, and little in the way of comfort features. Transmission choices included a close-ratio Muncie M 22 4-speed manual or Turbo Hydromatic 400 automatic. The manual was the enthusiast's choice, offering complete control over the engine's power delivery. The M22 was nicknamed Rock Crusher for its straight-cut gears that produced a distinctive whine under acceleration. The automatic was slightly quicker in the quarter mile due to consistent shift points and no opportunity for driver error. The LS6 Chevelle's rarity makes it particularly collectible today. Only about 4,000 LS6 engines were installed in 1970 Chevelle, and many were destroyed in street racing or poorly executed modifications. Surviving examples with proper documentation command prices well into 6 figures. The LS6 represents the absolute peak of GM's muscle car development, a moment when engineers were given free rein to build the fastest possible street car without compromise. It was the right car at the right time, and nothing quite like it would be built again for decades. Number 3, 1970, Plymouth Hemi Cuda. The 1970 Plymouth Cuda with the 426 cubic inch Hemi engine was a legend even when new. With quarter-mile times in the low 13-second range, 13 flat with optimal conditions, and trap speeds around 107 miles per hour, it was one of the quickest production cars ever built. The Hemi engine had dominated drag racing for years, and in its final street application, it went out with a roar that still echoes through automotive history. The 426 Hemi was rated at 425 horsepower, a number that everyone knew was completely fictitious. Real output was estimated at 550 to 600 horsepower depending on tuning and atmospheric conditions. The engine featured hemispherical combustion chambers that provided optimal airflow, massive valves operated by dual rocker shafts, and construction so robust that drag racers could double the power output without grenading the block. What made the Hemi special was its complete dominance. On the street, nothing could touch it. At the drag strip, properly set up Hemi Cudas won everything. The engine's reputation was so fearsome that many street racers would refuse to run against Hemi cars, knowing defeat was inevitable. The sound alone was intimidating, a deep mechanical thunder that announced you were dealing with something serious. The Cuda's E-body platform was redesigned for 1970 with aggressive styling that perfectly matched the Hemi's performance. The long hood and short deck proportions, the dramatic fender bulges, and the available shaker hood scoop created one of the most visually arresting muscle cars ever built. Paint colors like plum crazy purple, limelight green, and Hemi orange ensured these cars were never subtle. The Hemi's power delivery was different from conventional engines. Below 3,000 RPM, it felt strong but not overwhelming. Above 3,000 RPM, it came alive with a ferocity that could surprise even experienced drivers. The engine needed revs to make its power, which meant drivers had to work the transmission to stay in the power band. This made the Hemi more demanding to drive quickly than Torquier big blocks, but the rewards were worth the effort. Living with a Hemi Cuda required commitment. Fuel economy was measured in single digits. The engine required premium fuel and frequent maintenance. The aggressive camshaft produced a lumpy idle that made the car unpleasant in stop-and-go traffic. Insurance companies charged outrageous premiums, often doubling or tripling the cost of insuring a standard Cuda. These were not practical cars for daily transportation. They were rolling statements of automotive excess. The interior was pure muscle car, functional but not luxurious. High-back bucket seats provided decent support, and the dashboard featured full instrumentation, including a tachometer that was essential for extracting maximum performance. Sound insulation was minimal, meaning occupants experienced the full acoustic glory of the Hemi's exhaust note. Comfort was sacrificed on the altar of performance. The 1970 Hemi Cuda was the final street application of Chrysler's legendary engine. After 1970, the Hemi was discontinued for street use due to emissions regulations and insurance pressures. Only about 650 Hemi Cudas were built in 1970, making them among the rarest muscle cars ever produced. Today, these cars command seven-figure prices at auction, valued not just for their performance, but for their historical significance. The Hemi Cuda represented the absolute peak of American muscle car development, a moment when power was unlimited and compromise was unthinkable. It was the right car at the right time, and nothing quite like it would ever be built again. Number 2, 1970 Dodge Challenger RT Hemi. The Dodge Challenger RT with the 426 Hemi engine was essentially the Cuda's corporate twin, sharing the same E-body platform and legendary engine. But the Challenger had slightly different proportions and styling that some enthusiasts actually preferred. With quarter-mile times matching the Hemi Cuda at around 13 flattened trap speeds in the 107 mile-per-hour range, it was equally devastating in straight-line performance while offering a slightly more refined package. The Challenger's wheelbase was 2 inches longer than the Cuda's, stretching to 110 inches. This provided better interior space and a slightly more planted feel at high speeds. The extra length made the Challenger feel more like a grand tourer than a pure muscle car, which was intentional. Dodge positioned the Challenger as the more sophisticated alternative to Plymouth's aggressive Cuda, though with the Hemi engine, sophistication was relative. The styling differences between Challenger and Cuda were subtle but significant. The Challenger featured a split grille with hidden headlights, while the Cuda wore a shark-nosed front end. The Challenger's roofline was slightly less aggressive, and the overall design felt more balanced. Neither approach was better or worse, just different enthusiasts debated the styling merits endlessly, usually concluding that both were among the best-looking muscle cars ever built. The Hemi engine performed identically in both applications, delivering the same devastating acceleration and quarter-mile times. But the Challenger's slightly longer wheelbase and different weight distribution gave it marginally better high-speed stability. On winding roads, the chassis dynamics were nearly identical. On the drag strip, the performance difference was negligible. The choice between Hemi Challenger and Hemi Cuda came down to personal preference and dealer availability more than measurable performance differences. The Challenger's interior offered more space and slightly better finish quality than the Cuda. The dashboard design was more conventional, with better ergonomics for tall drivers. The rear seat actually provided usable space for adults, while the Cuda's back seat was best reserved for small children or cargo. These differences mattered little to enthusiasts focused purely on performance, but they made the Challenger a more practical choice for buyers who needed occasional 4-passenger capability. Like all Hemi cars, the Challenger RT Hemi came with heavy-duty components throughout. The suspension featured stiffer springs and shocks. The brakes were upgraded with larger discs and drums, and the driveline included reinforced axles and stronger U-joints. Everything about the car was engineered to handle the Hemi's power without failing. This made the Challenger Hemi one of the most robust muscle cars ever built. Rarity makes the Hemi Challenger particularly collectible today. Only about 350 Hemi Challengers were built in 1970, even fewer than the CUDA. Most buyers chose the 440 or 383 engines, which were cheaper to buy and insure while still delivering strong performance. Those who ordered Hemis understood they were buying something special, a car that represented the absolute peak of American muscle car development. The 1970 Dodge Challenger RT Hemi stood alongside the CUDA as one of the fastest muscle cars ever built. Its 13-second quarter-mile capability was matched by very few production cars, and its Hemi engine was the stuff of legend. The Challenger represented Dodge's brief moment at the top of the muscle car hierarchy, a year when they built cars that could compete with and often beat anything from Ford, Chevrolet, or any other manufacturer. It was a high watermark that would never be reached again. Number 1, 1970 Oldsmobile 442 W30 with Stage 2 Experimental Package. You expected the Hemi to top this list. Everyone does. But there's a little-known car that was actually quicker in the quarter mile than even the legendary Hemi cars. The 1970 Oldsmobile 442 W30 with the experimental Stage 2 package could run consistent 12.8 to 12.9 second quarter miles with trap speeds around 110 miles per hour. These weren't magazine test cars or professionally built racers. These were actual production vehicles, and barely, that Oldsmobile built for homologation purposes to compete in NHRA Superstock racing. The Stage 2 package took the already potent W3455 engine and added components that pushed it beyond anything else available in a street-legal package. Modifications included specially selected cylinder heads with hand-ported intake and exhaust ports, a more aggressive camshaft, lightweight pistons that raised compression to 11.5 to 1, an aluminum intake manifold, and headers instead of exhaust manifolds. The result was an engine making well over 500 horsepower, possibly as much as 550, in a package that looked stock from the outside. Only a handful of Stage 2 W30s were built, probably fewer than 50, making them the rarest performance Oldsmobiles ever produced. They were intended primarily for drag racing, but because they were built as complete cars with VIN numbers and warranties, they qualify as production vehicles. Buyers had to know to ask for the Stage 2 package, and dealers had to be willing to order it. Most weren't, which is why so few were built. The performance was absolutely savage. 12-second quarter miles in 1970 were exotic car territory, the domain of race cars and custom builds. The fact that Oldsmobile built production vehicles capable of such times is remarkable. 0 to 60 happened in under 5 seconds. 60 to 100 took less than 7 seconds. The Stage 2 442 was legitimately one of the quickest accelerating production cars in the world. The car's appearance gave no hint of its capability. Without the Stage 2 option, it looked like any other W3442, which itself looked relatively subtle compared to flashier muscle cars. The forced air hood scoops were functional but understated. The badges were small. The paint colors ranged from conservative to moderately bold. This was the ultimate sleeper. A car that looked merely quick, but was actually devastating. The handling was surprisingly competent for a car with such extreme straight-line performance. Oldsmobile's engineers had developed the 442 chassis over several years, refining the suspension geometry and tuning to provide good control without sacrificing ride quality too much. The brakes were upgraded with larger discs and drums. The steering was quick and responsive. The Stage 2 wasn't just a drag strip monster. It could handle real-world driving conditions. Living with a Stage 2 requires commitment and expertise. The high compression ratio demanded premium fuel and careful tuning. The aggressive camshaft produced a rough idle and reduced low-speed drivability. The close ratio 4-speed manual transmission required frequent shifting in city traffic. Fuel economy was abysmal. These were compromises that serious enthusiasts accepted in exchange for the performance. But they made the car unsuitable for casual ownership. The Stage 2's rarity and performance make it one of the most collectible muscle cars today. Many were crashed or blown up by owners who didn't understand what they had. Others were converted back to standard W30 specification when parts failed and owners couldn't find replacements. Surviving examples with proper documentation are worth enormous sums. often exceeding the value of Hemi cars despite being far less famous. The 1970 Oldsmobile 442 W30 Stage 2 represents the absolute peak of muscle car performance before emissions regulations ended the party. It was quicker in the quarter mile than Hemi cars, LS6 Chevelle, or anything else you could buy from a dealer. It proved that Oldsmobile's engineers could build cars as fast as anyone when given the freedom to do so. The Stage 2 stood as the ultimate expression of displacement-based performance, a car that achieved 12-second times through cubic inches, compression, and aggressive tuning rather than exotic technology. It was the fastest muscle car of the 1970s, period. These 12 machines proved that even as emissions regulations, insurance companies, and oil crises tried to kill the muscle car, Detroit could still build devastatingly quick quarter-mile monsters. From the affordable Duster to the exotic Stage 2 442, these cars represented American performance at its peak. They were the last hurrah before compromise became unavoidable, the final roar before the silence. Which of these speed demons would you take to the drag strip? Drop your answer in the comments, and if you love stories from the era when quarter-mile times mattered more than emissions ratings, hit that subscribe button for more.